Okay, so let's go through these two chapters, kind of the big picture. Both of them mention Babylon. Last hour, 17, Babylon. She was intoxicated. She's called the harlot of Babylon. Chapter 18, it's a city. So Babylon, the great harlot, is a liar. That's 17. It's religion. She's riding the political rulers, 7 heads and 10 horns. She's the mother of harlots and abomination. That's all the priests and witch doctors and religious practitioners that have deceived people away from the one way to heaven into the many roads to heaven. She's drunk with the blood of the saints because religion has wanted to obscure the singularity and exclusivity of Christ and make all roads go, and anybody that didn't agree, they got rid of them. So that's martyrdom. Now we're coming to the twin. Babylon, the great city, is about idols. It's about materialism. And it's basically the rich and the famous are kind of profiled, the kings, the merchants, those that trade by sea, and it's about commercialism and materialism. Now this really resonated with the people. Remember, the majority of the early Christians were poor. Remember Jesus said, the poor receive me gladly? The early church was primarily slaves. What did Paul say? Not many mighty, not many noble, not many rich are called. That's the last verses of 1 Corinthians 1. So in this 2 generations, there are only a few rich people. Now they're very interesting. You read the last chapter of Romans, chapter 16, there's mention of a senator in there. There's also mention, do you remember Priscilla and Aquila? Now even saying that's kind of funny. Priscilla was a woman. Do you ever say Mrs. and Mr. in English? I mean, that's like a misnomer to say Mrs. and Mr. We always say Mr. and Mrs. But why is it Priscilla, a woman, and Aquila, her husband? Because Priscilla was from the Prisca family. I mean, there is a monument today in Rome to them. They were wealthier than the emperor. And they were not sure how Priscilla and Aquila came to Christ. But she reached her family, and they died. One of the wealthiest families in Rome died during the persecution. So there were a few rich people in the early church, but most of them weren't. And so God is telling them, keep on with the plan. Are you living for what will never burn up? Now, what did John already say? Remember, they already had his other letters. John was the pastor at Ephesus. He'd already written 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. He'd already written the gospel by John. In fact, he was getting that done because he didn't want to die by the hands of the Romans before his final account, his inspired account of Jesus. The best of the Gospels, if you ask me, is the final one. So he'd already done that. But do you remember what he said in 1 John? Love not the world, nor the things in the world, for all that is in the world, lust the flesh, lust the eyes, pride of life, is not of the fathers of the world, and the world is passing away, and the lust thereof. But he that does the will of God abides forever. Are you living for what will never burn up when the world passes away? That's this whole chapter. And so these people who were living, this was also the wealthiest part of the Roman Empire. That's why it was the most Roman Empire place. They had enough money to build the biggest temples. They had enough money to build the most elaborate gymnasiums. The theaters were out of this world. Rome had a few buildings bigger. But this was the most wealthy, constructed part of the Roman Empire. And to these people, constantly tempted with materialism, Jesus writes them and says, hey, are you living for what will never burn up? And I think he's asking us the same. Revelation 18, point number 1, you can choose to live for what lasts forever. You can choose. I've had a lot of very wealthy friends, and I could tell you stories about them. But money doesn't buy happiness. It just buys more places to look for it. And we think they're happier. But if you read much about the rich and the famous, like Ecclesiastes says, the poor people work all day and are tired and they go right to bed and they go to sleep. The rich people can't sleep because they're worried someone's going to steal their stuff, and they've got all that security. Number 1, Jesus always condemns the idolatry of worldliness. And let's just jump right into chapter 18 and look what he says. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. Do you see, this is sequential. John, in chapter 15, he's seeing all these bowl carriers come out, and they stand on the edge. Chapter 16, they're dumping their bowls one after another. Chapter 17, one of the bowl dumpers starts telling him about the harlot. Chapter 18, another angel comes down from heaven. And so John is standing on the edge watching, and this angel comes from where he is down to earth, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. See how powerful angels are? I mean, that's why the Lord says don't worship angels, because it would be easy to worship angels because they're so amazing. I mean, they glow, they light the earth. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon. See the tie back to Tower of Babel and where all of this started, religion and materialism. Babylon, the great, is fallen. So immediately you say, is that Babylon in Iraq? Is this talking about Rome? What is... Did you know that? I'm not sure. Some of the greatest minds have spent their lifetime studying this. I mean, Dallas Seminary has so many great theologians, and one of them proved conclusively that this is the city on the Tigris River in Iraq today that it's talking about, and another one spent his time proving it's the city of Rome. You know what? It's just Babylon. We're not sure which city it is, but it's become the dwelling place of demons. I think it just speaks of commercialism and materialism globally. It's become the dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and cage for every unclean and hated bird. And all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and they've become rich through the abundance of her luxury. Now look at verse 4. I heard another voice come from heaven. So Jesus is in his earthly ministry, he always condemned materialism. Remember what he said, Matthew 16, whoever gains the whole world loses his own soul. What do you give in exchange for your soul? Colossians 3:5, Paul said, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth. Fornication, remember it's always first or second in all the lists. This is a sin list. Uncleanness, which is tied to fornication. Passion, which is tied to the whole party life. Evil desires, which is tied to the whole thing. And covetousness, that's kind of like, reading the advertisements and watching and listening to them and wanting something so bad, that's covetousness. Look at this, which is idolatry. None of us would bow down before a little statue of Buddha. Are you kidding? That's an idol. But I know people, and have known them for decades, that will sacrifice everything for that promotion in their job. They work 70, 80 hours. They'll move their family across the country to where there's no church, no Christian school, no fellowship. They'll do it for $10,000 raise. What is that? Well, they say it's for the security of their family. Do you know there's two ways to live? Here's your income. Either you have a lifestyle right here, so you've got to get a raise to match this lifestyle, or if this is your income, you have a lifestyle just below it. When Bonnie and I got married, you know what the simple pastor told us that he was not, like from Harvard or anything. He just was a simple Bible teaching pastor. He said, spend less than you earn every month and you'll have a happy marriage. Did you catch that? Spend less than you earn. That's not American. American is you go out and buy all the furniture as newlyweds and just pay $20 a month on it for 40 years. And it'll wear out and you'll buy more and pay $100 and add it to the 20 for 40 years. And pretty soon you're in debt. And you go to the bank and they'll loan you enough money to get out of debt, which is actually being more in debt. They call it consolidation of debt. America, the American dream, is built on covetousness. You want newer stuff. And God says, no, that's idolatry. You shouldn't want it. So let's keep going. We've got to back up, see where we're going. Remember, 17 said, Satan's deadly offer is religion. Find another way to God. Materialism is something more important than God. And so one is talking about denying the exclusive way to heaven, the single gate and going through all the other gates. This chapter is denying God as most important. And we do it by our lifestyle, we do it by our time usage. I already showed you that. Oh, by the way, I'd love to be friends with some of you. On Facebook, Bonnie and I are both called John Samuel Barnett. She doesn't have a YouTube account, but a Facebook account.